Eagles Entertainment.
With the 10th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and today we wrap up our Journey series as we follow the paths of all of the Eagles' Day 3 selections in the 2021 NFL Draft, starting with cornerback Zach Mcpherson, then moving to running back Kenneth Gainwell, defensive tackle Marlin Tui Pelotu, defensive end Tyron Jackson, and then linebackers Jacoby Stevens and Patrick Johnson. Some of these guys we discussed a ton over the last year and change, and some only came up a couple of times. But regardless, we've got analysis, we've got interviews, we've got scouting reports, and more to help take us through all of these players and their journeys to Philadelphia. Before we get there, though, just a couple of things. First up, this is going to be a very Eagles-centric show. So for our non-Eagles fan audience, don't worry. We'll be back talking about your team in no time. We're continuing our breakdowns of every class around the league right here on the show. So stay tuned for those here on the feed. And then also, we're going to be starting our look just at overall just the process, the scouting process, evaluating it, and all the different angles of that entire process. So make sure you stay tuned to that right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. To our Eagles fans, if you are not already, be sure to go subscribe to this podcast. If you are just checking it out to hear the analysis about Zach Mcpherson and Kenneth Gainwell or any of these other players, I'm here to tell you now, you don't need to wait. If you were subscribed all along, you would have heard all of this analysis and all of this insight over the last 2 years, over the last 3 years about these players, and you would have been well equipped with your own opinions on the Eagles' decision to take all of these guys. Just a month ago in April's draft, we were talking about prospects all across the country all season long, and you can get that analysis to your podcast device just by hitting that subscribe button. So if you have not already, please make sure, go on, hit subscribe, follow us along on our journey here to the 2022 draft, which we know is going to be so important for this Eagles team. Potentially 3 first-round picks next April. That being said, let's get this episode rolling. Let's jump back in time to hear more on our thoughts on all of these guys and their journeys to Philadelphia. We're going to start things off with the 4th-round pick, Zach Mcpherson.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
So to say that sports is the family business for the Mcpherson clan would be a little bit of an understatement because Zach's father, Garrick, was a defensive back at Boston College before playing in the NFL for the New England Patriots. He gets married. He goes on to have 8 children, all of whom would go on to have athletic success, really success both on and off the field, starting with the oldest of Zach's brothers, Garrick Jr., who played corner at Maryland, was eventually drafted in the 7th round by the New York Giants back in 2006. Josh Mcpherson walked on to Penn State as a running back. Derek Mcpherson went to Illinois as a wide receiver before eventually transitioning to baseball, playing with the Milwaukee Brewers organization. Emmanuel Mcpherson played corner at New Mexico. Jeremiah Mcpherson played defensive back at IUP out in Western Pennsylvania. His older brother Matthew was a 4th-round pick in the Major League Baseball draft, and his younger sister currently plays soccer at Wisconsin Green Bay. Sports are in the Mcpherson's blood, so it was no surprise that Zach, as a 4-star recruit coming out of Maryland, committed to Penn State back in 2016 to play both football and baseball for the Nittany Lions, but things didn't quite go as planned for Zach in State College. He redshirted his first year, then played 24 games over the next 2 seasons, but no starts. He had just 16 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, and mop-up duty for the Nittany Lions. He took care of business off the field, though, because he graduated in 3 years and was able to transfer to play right away for his future team. But where would he go? Well, as it is in many walks of life, it's all about who you know, right? And as I found out by talking to Texas Tech head coach Matt Wells over on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, the Mcpherson Family Network helped him land in Lubbock. So let's talk about Zach, because this is a player that arrived there at Texas Tech at the same time that you did, just about when you came over as the head coach. What was it like kind of installing him as a starter from day one? He was a career backup here locally with us in Penn State. What was it like? What were your first interactions with Zach?
Yeah, first of all, Mcpherson family and I go way back. Coached his brother Emmanuel at New Mexico probably 10 years ago. And so had familiarity with the family, helped in the recruiting process. Zach chose us over a couple other Big 12 schools. Hadn't really gotten on the field much at Penn State. Be honest with you, limited video, but knew what kind of person he was, what kind of family he came from. Tremendous people, tremendous, I know, parents and upbringing. So getting Zach in here was good right out of the gate. He did a great job of really buying into what we were doing here on the field as well as in the weight room. He changed a bunch over 2 years. I mean, he developed himself. His skill development got better, to be real frank with you. He played his best ball his second year. I think it's also kind of testifies to guys that are grad transferring like Zach that have 2 years, and they can go through an off season and have a better second year. And Zach certainly did that, and I think took advantage of his opportunity. And the Eagles have recognized that. A lot of other NFL teams did. And he did well in his pro day. So look forward to seeing what he's got, the next opportunity.
When you get Zach on campus, and you talked about, just kind of hadn't played a ton, what were some of the traits that allowed him to find early success as he was still trying to hone in on that cornerback skill, as you referred to?
Yeah, I think before he honed in just in terms of his footwork and his technique, and really changed in the weight room and bought into nutrition and our strength training I think the first thing was confidence. He's a confident young man. That's a confident family. He's been playing ball, multiple sports for a long time. It's kind of ingrained in him. So I think the confidence thing that he came in, and first of all, you better have that at corner, as we all know. But I think the confidence is what allowed him to play early on. Yes, he was talented, and yes, he had good athletic ability, but he really improved from his junior to his senior year quite a bit.
And to me, when you talk about his athletic background, you mentioned the confidence there, playing corner, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, you got to deal with failure sometimes, especially in that league. I mean, it's a passing league, as everybody knows. You're going to give up some big plays, but then you also have Zach, who has that ability to take the ball away as well. Were there cases where you saw, he's going to get beat one drive, and then he's going to come back, and he's going to be able to make that play. He's not going to go in the tank after giving up a play.
Yeah, I certainly think in this league, in the Big 12, every Saturday you go up against an elite wideout, an elite quarterback, and there's always a really good play caller too. And so I think he's challenged. Every corner in this league in the Big 12 is challenged every Saturday. To have the confidence is important. To have a short memory is very important. Learn from it and move on, and I think Zach displays all those characteristics.
Yeah, I think that baseball background certainly comes in handy there as well, with all the failure you deal with playing baseball. Coach, the last part I wanted to bring up to you too as well, with Zach, that kind of stood out to me. Number one, the position versatility, but then two, with RPOs, the quick slants, the glance routes, corners, the DBs have to be able to tackle in today's NFL now too. What did you see from Zach in that arena coming forward towards the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, he does have. He's got versatility. We played him in the slot. We played him as some people are calling it the nickel corner over the slot receiver. That's a position here in the Big 12 that you see in the NFL more and more. Guys in the NFL, the slot, quick, fast receivers, he can play that position. I think he's more than a willing tackler. He's an effective tackler. It's not, you don't say that much about corners, but Zach is very effective. He can go right through the hip. He does a nice job with tackling and, facing all the RPOs and that kind of, philosophy in the Big 12, which is becoming more prevalent. I know in the NFL, I think it would be an advantage to him as well.
For that entire interview with Coach Matt Wells, be sure to go check out the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, where we dove even deeper into Zach's skill set and how he can transition to the NFL. And as Coach Wells said there, Zach went on to be a 2-year starter for the Red Raiders. He posted 15 pass breakups and 4 interceptions over 21 starts, most of which came in his senior season of 2020. That production last fall got him noticed, and he earned himself an invitation to the East-West Shrine Bowl. I actually had the pleasure of welcoming the game's director of scouting, Dan Shanka, to the show back in January, and he did speak about Zach and his skill set right here on the Journey of the Draft podcast. But obviously, due to COVID-19, the game wasn't played. Zach still found a way, though, to be seen by NFL scouts during that pre-draft process. He didn't get an invite to the Senior Bowl, but he did go out to the Hula Bowl. And when I caught up with Eagles Vice President of Player Personnel, Andy Weidel, he mentioned that the Eagles did speak with him out at that event. So let's talk about Zach Mcpherson. This is a player that locally, he's from the area. He goes out to Penn State, plays there a couple years as a backup, and then goes down to Texas Tech. When you have a transfer player, and we talked about this with Landon as well, do you talk with sources at both schools, or what is that experience like during the evaluation process to try and learn more about the player?
Absolutely, and our scouts do an excellent job of covering for each other on transfers like these two guys. And our Northeast scout was at Penn State, and he followed up with Zach, and obviously our Southeast scout Allen, he goes to Florida State, he goes to Alabama both. So we had great. They did a great job digging and mining the information, the background of both of these players. But Zach's an impressive guy. He graduated 3 years from Penn State, goes to Texas Tech, plays good football. Got his master's degree in December. We really like his position versatility, his football IQ, his movement skills. He went out to the Hula Bowl, and we had two of our scouts that went out there and, evaluated him for the week out there. He had a strong week of practice, interviewed very well. And, he really put himself on the radar through this process during the season and in the postseason. And then we interviewed him here. Coaches interviewed him and just came away with it. Really impressed with the maturity, the football IQ, and his presence.
It seems like he's one of those guys where everybody across the board really just felt strongly about him, no matter who you talk to in the building. What is it like when you can get that kind of a player where everybody's kind of in lockstep and he's like, man, like we all feel good about the selection?
That's great. It really fell to us. We had consistent grades on him, buy-in from scouts and the coaches, and that's really ideally what you want. Everybody was excited to have him. We thought he might go around earlier, and we couldn't be happier when he fell to us. And just watching it all come together on draft day, you just get excited, and then he's there, and you get him on the phone, and everything, all that work comes to fruition. When you tell him, hey, we're going to make you an Eagle here, and his reaction, that's why you do this. That's why you scout. That's why you get into the evaluation process. We couldn't be happier to add him here to what we're doing with the Philadelphia Eagles.
So as Andy highlighted there, everyone in the Eagles organization was excited about Zach Mcpherson. Getting back to the timeline here, draft weekend arrives, and in the lead up to the event, many media analysts and talking heads had the Eagles pegged to take a corner somewhat early in the draft, whether it was round 1, round 2, round 3, but that would not be the case. The Eagles stuck to their board and stood by a best player available mantra that, through days 1 and 2, something that general manager Howie Roseman spoke about on the final day of the draft after the Eagles selected Zach in the 4th round.
You mentioned earlier about staying true to your board, perhaps is why you guys didn't draft a cornerback like on day 1 or day 2. So when you did draft Zach Mcpherson, how does he kind of fit into what the plan is at cornerback? And you mentioned also other ways to skin the cat. I mean, what else can you do, like in the summer, I guess, or during the offseason to address the position?
Yeah, I'll start at the beginning and, where we were picking and who the best player on the board was, in our opinion, taking Devontae in the 1st round. So I don't know that there was a conversation really about anyone else there for us. And then we went into the 2nd round again. We just felt like there was a potential difference maker on the board as a player and a person, and we felt like it was somebody that it was a person and player worth gambling on in Landon. And when you get around Landon and you talk to him and you really study his tape and you study his person, you study who he is, you kind of don't feel like it's as big a gamble, because you just feel like this is a person who understands what it takes to overcome adversity and play at a high level and have people rally around him. And being in this league for as long as I have, and it's been a long time, those are special things. Those are hard things to find. And they're hard things to find, certainly in the 2nd round. And so that's why we took him. And then when we went into the 3rd round, listen, we're always going to build this football team, and we're going to start with the line of scrimmage. And right or wrong, as long as I'm here, that's going to be the priority. And I think the great things about the two guys next to me is that's what they believe too. And you could say it all you want, but it better show in your actions. And so if we have an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman sticking out on our board and they're the highest guy, I promise you we're going to take them. And you saw that in the last couple of days. I'm sure there are some people sick and tired of seeing the Philadelphia Eagles take linemen. But you know what? That's how we won a championship, and that's how we're going to win another championship. And so for us, we weren't going to get in a situation where we were going to force a position. We promised ourselves that, and those weren't the conversations in the 3rd round either. In the 3rd round, we feel like we got a guy who's explosive and twitched up and's got great character, and he can play inside or out, and he can get after quarterbacks. And that excites us, and that's why we picked Milton Williams. And towards the end of the third round, we saw another player sticking on our board, and that was Zach Mcpherson. And we had some conversations. I mean, I don't know if you guys realize, if you go back to the tape last night, Andy and I got a little anxious here. We were sitting up here, and I kind of looked at Bob a couple times. He wasn't looking at me. I looked at Dave a little bit to get Bob's attention, and we thought about going back up because we had Zach Mcpherson right there, and we wanted to get him because of the kind of player he was, not because he was a corner and we needed a corner. Then you asked a final question. You said, how do you go and address that? Well, I know in 2017 that we needed a corner too. And we got to August and we had a preseason game in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we made a trade with the Buffalo Bills and we got a corner that helped us win a Super Bowl. So, we've had experiences about getting guys late in the process. In that same year, we needed a running back at the trade deadline. We made a trade at the trade deadline. So I promise you, I promise our fans that we will do whatever it takes at any time of the year to improve this roster.
We've heard the word versatility come up a number of times here regarding Mcpherson. So naturally, after the pick, many in the local media wondered, where's Mcpherson going to play in this secondary? He was asked about it immediately after he was picked by the Eagles on draft day. Here's what Zach had to say at his post-draft press conference.
And the type of player I am, I call myself a versatile player. I'm not constrained to just one position. I definitely say I'm a savvy, athletic defensive back who's willing to tackle and make plays on the ball.
Hey, Zach, welcome to Philly. I wanted to ask you, do you see yourself more as playing on the inside or outside? And how much does your athletic background with your family and everything kind of help you get ready for this level?
Yeah, so like I said, I don't really constrain myself to just one thing. I take pride in being versatile and being able to do multiple things on the field, whether it's inside, outside, or even back at safety. So I find it as a positive trait, that I'm open to use with this program.
I did want to ask about coverage. You say you don't want to be constrained to one thing and you're versatile. Have you played more zone or man in your college career? And do you think you're better at one or the other?
Yeah, definitely both schools. I played both. I like them both. Whatever the coach brings in the call, I'm fine with either or. That's just the nature of the game. And, being in Big 12, it's a lot of men. And so I'm fine with anything.
Lastly, Zach caught up with Eagles insider Dave Spadaro over on the Eagles Insider podcast after he was selected, and Dave asked him about overcoming the adversity he faced at Penn State and how he was able to build on that down at Texas Tech. Here's what Zach had to say about that experience.
Zach, let's talk about football and your journey here through Penn State to Texas Tech, now to the NFL. How would you describe it?
Man, this is definitely a journey full of ups and downs, but I just kept with everything, kept to the plan. Never gave up on myself, and it worked out well for me in the end.
Was it frustrating at times?
Definitely frustrating. There's times, where, you doubt yourself, but that's where, you have to lean on your faith a little bit more and just keep with everything that you have going for yourself.
It really seemed like it really all came together for you at Texas Tech. Why was the fit such a good one? And is that what we all need to learn here? Is that when you really believe in your mind, you will achieve on the field?
Definitely. I felt like just that whole transition down to Texas Tech, from the culture shock just to the change of scenery, kind of being in the middle of nowhere, it really helped me and made me reflect on myself, look in the mirror and, see what I really wanted to do. And as soon as I did that, it just all snapped for me and things started falling into place.
Good stuff there from Dave. And for that entire interview, be sure to go check out the Eagles Insider podcast wherever podcasts can be found. So the Eagles make Zach the second defensive pick of the draft after taking Milton Williams in round 3. But they would go back to the offensive side of the ball with their next pick, and that was Kenny Gainwell, the running back out of Memphis. He would be the team's 5th-round selection, and he would actually be the only player the Eagles selected that did not play football in 2020. He had just 1 year of on-field play during his time with the Tigers, but that limited sample size was enough to get him noticed. In fact, we talked about him a couple of times here on the show during that standout season of 2019. And for some of that analysis, I'm just going to take us back to December 14th of that year. Our friend Ben Fennell was preparing to work the AAC title game for ESPN. And in previewing that matchup between Memphis and Cincinnati, we had to talk about one of the more dynamic players in the game, Mr. Kenny Gainwell.
I'm heading to Memphis for the American Conference Championship game, a rematch from last week. Memphis Tigers again against the Cincinnati Bearcats.
All right, well, let's get into some of these prospects. Memphis is actually a team that I've seen live.
Interesting.
I saw them when they came here to the Link to take on Temple.
Their only loss of the year.
That's right. Kenny Gainwell, the running back, he was on the semifinalist list for the Doak Walker Award as the top running back in the country.
Oh, he was on the semi list.
He was on the semi list. He made some plays in that game. We talked about Patrick Taylor was the senior coming in. I remember talking with Darrell Henderson, with Tony Pollard at the Combine, and they were loving Patrick Taylor. Oh, big kid, physical. He's going to be the guy. Taylor gets hurt early in the year, and Gainwell comes in and has been producing at a high level.
Yeah, so Taylor was supposed to take Darrell Henderson's role,
right?
And then Gainwell comes in and takes Tony Pollard's role. But obviously with the injury, Gainwell's had to kind of step up and take the full brunt of the carries. But just really quick, because he's only a sophomore, very, very, very impressive kid, a dual threat running back.
Yep.
They'll motion him into the slot. I just watched him run a corner route from the slot. I watched him have 2 back shoulder catches against Tulane, one for 70 yards, another 30-yard touchdown.
So this is the kind of player we're dealing with
the
here.
Screen game, really fun kid to watch. High school
the
quarterback.
running back sail routes out of the backfield.
No question. Yazoo County from Mississippi. Fletcher Cox went there. Hall of Famer Willie Brown.
Nice. Eagles
right
connection.
now, there's only 2 players in the country at 400 yards receiving, 400 yards rushing.
Okay.
Gainwell is one of them. And also Max Borghi, the little number 21 from Washington State.
He's a true sophomore, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then backs with 1,000 yards rushing.
Okay.
He's the leading receiver in the country right now.
Interesting.
So a kid that's obviously loading up the stat sheet, both sides, rushing, receiving. Also a great story off the field. Game Day did. He had a brother that had a stroke suddenly a couple years ago.
Geez.
And someone that's really been there for his brother through some hard times there. So anybody that wants to dig that up, I'm sure it's on YouTube.
True sophomore, so not eligible for this year.
Nope.
We'll talk about for 2021. So again, that was from December 2019, and we talked about Gainwell the following week here on the show as well. Ben reported back on what he saw from him. Gainwell made a ridiculous back shoulder catch in that game, and Ben tabbed him as his down-the-road freak show, a guy to watch, as we would certainly be a name for us to keep an eye on for the 2021 NFL Draft. So now you fast forward several months, and while there was a global pandemic-sized cloud hovering over college football, we previewed the top players for us to watch back in the summer. Something we will do once again here on the show just a couple of weeks now. But first up, we previewed the players outside the Power 5 conferences. And we do that by breaking the prospects up into categories. When it came to discussing who the most intriguing underclassmen were outside the Power 5 conferences, there was only one name on my mind.
So I'll kick things off here for the next category, and we're going to go through our most intriguing underclassmen on offense. And I'm going to go with a guy that really stood out to me for the first time when I saw him live. I was at the Temple-Memphis game last fall, rather. It was in October, and Kenny Gainwell, the running back from Memphis, really stood out to me in that game. Now, going into last season, Patrick Taylor, the senior, was going to be seen as the guy. Gainwell comes in as a redshirt freshman after Taylor goes down with a little bit of an injury early in the season, and he took off. He ended up winning AAC Rookie of the Year. They were the conference champs. He was first team all conference. This kid was really, really impressive live. And just kind of give an idea of how respected he was by opponents, I actually talked with Temple linebacker Chappelle Russell, ended up being drafted, I think in the 6th or 7th round this past April. I talked with Chappelle Russell at the Combine, and I said, look, who's the toughest guy that you saw on the field this year in a game? And he told me that it was by far easy decision. It was Gainwell. He said he brings every aspect of the game. He's just not going to stop going. This is a direct quote from Russell. No matter how hard you hit him, he's going to bounce right back up. He's got good balance, great all-around game. You can see how much he cares about everything that he does. To do what he did last year as a freshman, where he was able to contribute to the eventual conference champs, I just think he's going to be a great player. Watching Memphis, I've watched some other players on that offense. You can see that he's moved around the formation a little bit, especially early in the year. He was moved around a little bit, so he's got some versatility. He can impact the pass game. Still a young player, but man, I'm excited to watch a little bit more of Kenny Gainwell. This is a guy, to me, that's really, really intriguing for me moving forward.
And I thought that quote that I got from Temple linebacker Chappelle Russell was interesting there as well, because Gainwell was known as that perimeter space player, the dual threat guy. And so for a senior linebacker on a Temple team that's known for its toughness, when he cited Gainwell's toughness and his urgency and his competitiveness, that stuck with me. And that showed the respect that Gainwell had earned from opponents in his redshirt freshman year in 2019. I was very excited to see him last fall in 2020. And obviously that was not to be, as Gainwell announced that he would be opting out of the 2020 season and declaring for the 2021 NFL Draft. And we talked about it right here on the show shortly after the announcement was made late last summer.
Let's go to the next position here. Memphis running back Kenny Gainwell, a guy that I mentioned back in our non-Power 5 preview, which was back mid-July at this point. Well, I'll tell you what, I went and studied some more Gainwell over the last week. Guys, I'm really impressed with this kid, and he's one of my favorite running backs that I've studied so far in this draft. I think there's a little bit of one name that I wrote down. I actually wrote down two names. I wrote down Kareem Hunt and Aaron Jones in terms of the way that he plays. Now, he's listed 5'11", 195. He looks a little bit bigger to me on film watching this kid. He's got some ability to make that first man miss. He consistently runs behind his pads. I like his balance. He's got some shake to him. He's got the ability to win with a stiff arm or some spin moves. A lot of different ways to make that first man miss. Just a great receiver out of the backfield as well, which is why I think of like an Aaron Jones, a Kareem Hunt, like just that profile of player, that ability to make that first man miss, and then that ability to impact the passing game. He's not a 4.3 athlete, but just a guy that I think is going to have a really easy transition to the NFL. I liked his vision downhill. He's not a power back, in terms of moving piles, but again, the contact balance was there. I liked a lot of what we saw from Kenny Gainwell. It's a shame we won't be able to see him with another year, but saw plenty of action last season. With 1 year as a starter at the running back spot, you're able to make that projection a little bit easier. Ben, I know you've seen Gainwell. You've studied Gainwell as well. What were your thoughts when you saw him declare?
Yeah, he's a fun player, a former high school quarterback, that dual threat kind of wildcat quarterback.
That's right.
Fit right into that Tony Pollard role, where you're really a dual threat, half running back, half perimeter back, half, a slot receiver. Made a lot of plays, whether they're back shoulders or 7 routes down the field, where he looks like a full-time slot receiver. And, I think Kareem Hunt, Aaron Jones, just a little squattier, a little thicker in the core. I see more of the, Deion Lewis or maybe the Miles Sanders style of player that can excel in both phases of the offense. But really fun player, not to mention the off-the-field stuff. Takes care of his special needs brother. ESPN did a really nice segment on that last year with him, and was one of 2 players in the country with 400 receiving, 400 rushing yards last year. So he's in pretty elite company with being a dual threat player. The thing I love, Fran, is the pacing of his strides. And then when he sees it, that instant acceleration past defenders. Yep. Not only in the open field, but in tight spaces between the tackles, making linebackers miss, knowing when to set up that blocker and darting out the back door. Really creative runner. It looks like he has a good feel already. When I watch him play, Fran, it looks like the game is just slow to him. And it's almost kind of in a warp speed, and he's seeing things just a step ahead. A really fun player to watch.
For a guy who's only been playing running back for a couple of years, too, right? I mean, that's the impressive part.
Exactly, and as Ben said, a former quarterback, and it's hard to blame his decision. He's lost 3 family members to COVID. I mean, just you understand where he's coming from. And when I watched him, I got Devin Singletary vibes because this is a guy who's not the biggest. He's not going, like you said, Fran. He's not going to run a 4.3. The 40-yard dash might not blow you away, but he understands what to do when he has a football. He has those instincts, and his ability as a pass catcher, that's what really stood out. Just kind of like we've seen some other running backs being more than just screen players, more than just a dump off option. Gainwell will flex out. He will run routes down the field. And he looks like he's been doing it his entire life. It creates issues for the defense when you don't know what he's going to do. So not only does he have that slippery athleticism, the natural instincts with the ball in his hands, but he's so versatile because of what he can do in the backfield or out of the backfield. Just a really impressive player who, when I did my running back preview, he was my number 4 running back. So someone that I think very highly of.
I really like this kid's transition to the NFL. You guys both mentioned the pass game upside, certainly there with Kenneth Gainwell.
So you could tell that I was pretty damn excited about Gainwell's prospects moving into the NFL at that point early last fall. And despite the fact that he did not play last season, we brought him up several times. And one segment in particular I wanted to share, it was from one of our favorite games during the season. We called it On the Clock, where Ben, Dane Brugler, and I would essentially have a debate each week. And Chris Mcpherson would come on. He would declare a winner. We kept score all season long and tried to have constructive, healthy debates each week here on the show, kind of in that format. Well, this week, the debate topic was, which running back in the draft offers the most value in the passing game? Dane had first pick that week. He went with Clemson's Travis Etienne. Ben had the second pick. He went with UCLA's Demetric Felton, who a lot of people felt was a wide receiver coming out of college. I had the third pick, and this one for me was a no-brainer.
I'll round the conversation out here with Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis. Now, number one, getting back to the football side of it, you only seen 1 year of him as a starter. He came in. There were two upperclassmen ahead of him, Antonio Gibson and Patrick Taylor. He comes in and takes the role. He was too good to keep on the bench. And the big thing is, with all of those other guys that were there playing in the backfield and doing other things, obviously Gibson was a receiver as well, they were able to move Gainwell all around the formation. So not only did when they went empty, did they move him out into the slot and out wide, but there were plenty of sets where Patrick Taylor was the back and Gainwell was in the slot or he was out wide. You didn't just see him running fades or running screen passes. You saw him running slants. You saw him running little stick routes, like little option routes over the ball. So I think there was a lot of route diversity there. And unlike Etienne, he's a really, really natural catcher of the football, really soft hands. He really addresses the football well in all areas of the field, whether it's in the intermediate area, down the field. He knows how to adjust to it in the screen game as well. Really natural pass catcher. That was one of the things that really caught my eye. And as a freshman, despite the fact that he wasn't that full-time guy early, he caught 51 passes last year in that offense. So he was really productive. He did it in a wide variety of ways at all three levels of the field and being able to make those plays down the field. A really fun player to watch in the passing game, and I think that his upside is very high. You look at what all the best offenses are doing in the league right now. You look at a lot of the best backs in the league. Teams are getting really creative with getting them out of the backfield on sail routes, on wheel routes, on rail routes, getting them down the field in a variety of ways. And I think that Gainwell certainly can do that. I think like Etienne, you're dealing with a young player. So there weren't a ton of reps, especially in that offense, of him in pass pro. Like Etienne, a willing blocker, technique just up and down. So I think it'd probably be kind of a toss-up there in terms of pass pro between both of these guys. But keep in mind, C-Mac, this guy was a high school quarterback, all right? So this guy, he came in early on in his career, never played running back, made the transition over there, and became one of the best receiving backs in all the country. Oh, by the way, while winning Rookie of the Year in the AAC, first team all-conference, Doak Walker semifinalist, ran for almost 500 yards, or 1,500 yards rather, on the ground. So I think when you look at Kenneth Gainwell, who, by the way, C-Mac, is from Yazoo City, Mississippi, Fletcher Cox's hometown. So you got the Eagles connection there. You look at Kenneth Gainwell. This guy is a really fun player that I'm excited to watch moving forward into the NFL. He is entering the 2021 NFL draft.
The winner, the first to have 4 victories in our JTTD on the clock segment. How about Fran Duffy going with Kenneth Gainwell?
Don't call it a comeback.
I'm intrigued by the ability to line up all over the formation, the production as a rusher as well. The fact that he's more of a natural receiver. Obviously maybe not a top of the line blocker, but willing participant. That's what you need. You need someone who's a willing participant. So all good arguments, all good cases there. But I'm going to go with Kenneth Gainwell, Memphis there.
I knew I liked you, C-Mac.
We get into the offseason and the pre-draft process, and Gainwell was constantly brought up here on the show. He was a big part of our running back preview episode earlier this spring, where I tabbed him as having the best vision amongst all the running backs being talked about on day 2. Ben reiterated his pass game value and thought he was the best receiving back of the day 2 options as well. And really, that was our mindset for the entire pre-draft process with Kenny Gainwell. He was likely to go off the board before the end of the 3rd round, despite not playing last year. And in our segment where we tried to play matchmaker for NFL teams at random positions, we actually pegged Gainwell to the LA Chargers in round 3. He was in multiple round 2 and round 3 mock drafts for our mock draft roundup segment. He was just a big part of the show. I loved him. Ben loved him. Dane loved him. So I thought I'd continue the love fest with our friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films. Let's hear what Greg thought about the former Memphis Tiger.
Let's start at running back. And this is a guy I know you and I both love on tape, and it would not surprise us at all if Kenny Gainwell from Memphis, who opted out this past season, he would have been a redshirt sophomore. He was a redshirt freshman last year, was their leading rusher, and I believe he was their second leading receiver as well. But that Kenny Gainwell could be one of the best backs in this class. I'd be interested to kind of get your thoughts on what you saw from him. Obviously nothing from this year, but going back to your notes from the summer, shed some light here on Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell, I watched last summer. And I got to tell you, I knew nothing about him. I mean, obviously, we've had backs come out of Memphis recently and that have played in the league, obviously. But I remember putting on Gainwell last summer. It's funny I'm saying this because I saw his name on a list.
That's right.
So,
it all comes full circle.
I know, it all does. It all does. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and maybe I'm a little jaded, but I was kind of blown away by Gainwell. I thought he was almost your classic NFL back in the sense that he was a very good runner, not a sensational runner. You know, you don't look at Gainwell and go, wow, that's the best runner I've ever seen, but clearly had very, very good running traits and could run in both zone and gap scheme, had kind of a darting, slashing style at the second and third levels, decisive. But what really stood out to me was this kid as a receiver.
Yep.
And that's what jumped out as far as transitioning him to the league, because this guy lined up all over the formation, including detached. He was split out wide. He had snaps at the boundary X, which you don't see from backs very often, Fran, as you know. And I made this note. I said he's not quite at the same level athletically and explosively as Alvin Kamara, who's truly special, but I thought he presented similar value to an NFL offense with his multiple run game experience and his ability as a receiver all over the formation.
Yep.
And so I saw him very much like Kamara. And, you know, what people have to remember, we know what Kamara is in the NFL, but Kamara was not a top 20 pick. And one reason he was not a top 20 pick, I would imagine, is because he didn't have a lot of carries at Tennessee. I think, if memory serves me correctly, he only had one game in his Tennessee career of 20 carries.
Yeah,
and by the way,
he split time with Jalen Hurd.
Jalen Hurt's freshman year, yes, he gained like 1,200 yards at Tennessee as a true freshman.
Yep.
That's correct. You know, Kamara, even in New Orleans now with Sean Payton, they use him, you know, he has 170, 175 carries, and that's what they do. Now, down the stretch of this past season, he had 3 or 4 games of 20-plus carries, and I guess we'll see what Sean Payton does with him in 2021. But up to this point, he's been used more as a multi-dimensional back than as a foundation back, and I saw Kenneth Gainwell as that kind of player.
Honestly, and you mentioned Alvin Kamara, and I agree with you that he's not the dynamic presence that Kamara is. You know, Kamara's just got, you know, some of that twitch and some of that juice that Gainwell doesn't have. But just from a profile standpoint,
right,
I feel like, and we don't know where Gainwell is going to end up going, but I feel like, you know, you look at Kareem Hunt when he was coming out of Toledo. He made people miss. He could, you know, he was a good receiver. You look back at Aaron Jones coming out of UTEP. Oh, you know, he's a really nifty runner. He's got good vision. Can make that first man miss. Oh, and he's a good receiver. Both guys came into the league as day 3 selections and became good runners that also were multi-dimensional threats that were used down the field in the passing game. I feel like Gainwell absolutely can be that guy. He can profile to be that kind of player for his future NFL offense.
Couldn't agree more. And in fact, I just made a note of his routes when I did him last summer, because I started, you know, I was watching and I'm saying, wow, he's running a lot of routes. And it was flat, angle, multiple screen concepts, tunnel screens, shallow crossers, speed outs from the slot, out routes from plus splits, seams from I-back alignments, wheel routes, sail route from the slot. And I remember that play. He caught a back shoulder fade from the boundary X alignment, which you never see with backs. So, I mean, this guy was running wide receiver routes from wide receiver splits.
So obviously Greg loved him too. This was a very pro Gainwell podcast. And it turns out we weren't alone. The Eagles also had a very high opinion of Kenny Gainwell. And it's something that Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni discussed after the team made him the pick in the 5th round, as was announced by team president Don Smolinski.
With the 150th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Kenneth Gainwell, running back, Memphis. Go Birds.
Nick, when you look at this draft class and the roster as it's set now, do you feel like you have some comparable talent to what you had in Indy and can use them in similar roles in your offense? Specifically, when you look at somebody like Kenneth Gainwell, maybe a Naheem Hines type player, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, we like a lot of the things that Kenneth can do. He does have a little bit of the things that you're saying right there, the ability to go outside and win one-on-one outside against linebackers, against safeties, to come out of the backfield and be able to do that as well. But then again, not always having to do that with him. He's shown that he's been really good in protection aspects of it as well. And that every time he's going in, it's not a pass play right to him. So he can protect, he can run the ball. So I think that's a good comparison. Not to say that we would use him exactly the same way, because no two players are exactly alike. But we do see the ability to create those mismatches with the linebackers and the safeties, whether inside or outside, with that player, whether he's in the slot, whether he's in the backfield, whether he's outside. So that's a really good comparison. And of course, when you're watching guys that are on your roster, or you're watching guys with the draft, you're constantly doing that. You're constantly saying, how will I use this guy, and how have we used this guy in the past, right? And so when you watch a player on our roster, or that we're getting ready to work with, those are the things that are going through your mind, all right? Okay, who have we thrown this shallow cross to in the past? Do they have a similar skill set to the player that we're thinking about drafting, or that is currently on our roster? Those things are constantly going through our heads, and yeah, I'm really excited about working with these guys and about the roster that we have to do the things that we want to do on offense.
We have a cool story about Gamwell, don't we? Remember, I was circling back on him, and it was a Sunday night during the NCAA tournament, and I was watching him, and it was a game I hadn't seen, and there were a couple plays that kind of hit me, and my phone was a little bit away, and Andy knows the story, and I told him the next morning, and I picked up my phone to text Nick, and I had a text from him. He was watching the same game I was, and it was his first exposure to him, and he was talking about this guy and how he would use him, so it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Equal excitement. Both of our excitement was high excitement level with Kenneth.
High excitement level with Kenneth. Yeah, that's the way I should have described that earlier. We shared that excitement here in the lead up to the draft when I caught up with Andy Weidel, I asked him about his impression of Kenny Gainwell and also how challenging the evaluation process was with him without that 2020 film. Here's what Andy had to say after the pick. So looking at Kenny Gainwell, the first player that the Eagles drafted where he did not play in 2020. How unique was that from an evaluation standpoint for so many players, Andy, to have to go back to 2019 film to be able to really get the full extent of the evaluation?
Well, we approached it with each player as a case-by-case situation, and you examine everything in reasons and the circumstances, and we felt a comfort level with Kenneth and the person, the player. You watch this film from 2019. Here's a guy that rushed for over 1,400 yards and over 600 yards receiving, and just explosive. The explosive plays that he put on tape, both the run and the pass. And then you throw in how he pass protected and his ability to get up there, step up and stone a blitzer or pick up chip and edge rusher. In his pro day, we were represented at his pro day in Memphis. He caught the ball extremely well, moved around well, was in shape. And we really like the value that we got with Kenneth, where we took him in the 5th round. So great kid, played a lot of energy, explosive, and we think he's a guy that has 3-down ability.
I also recently had the chance to catch up with Memphis coach Ryan Silverfield, who was the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator there for the Tigers during Gainwell's 2019 run to stardom. Now, the full conversation here with Coach Silverfield can be found on the latest Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, but here's a taste of what his coach had to say about Gainwell's impact. So we're excited to talk about Eagles' 5th-round draft choice, Kenny Gainwell, the running back from Memphis. This is a player you're obviously very familiar with. You did not have him for this past fall, but you had him for 2 seasons prior. Excited to kind of dig into him off the field and on the field. And I guess we'll start with the former first, Coach. When you talk about Kenny off the field, you know him very well. You were part of his recruitment process down there at Memphis. What is he going to bring off the field to this Eagles locker room and to the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, that's a great thing is Eagles fans should be quite excited. You guys got a fantastic young man. He's going to represent the community well. The city of Philadelphia will love him. He's going to embrace himself amongst all of you guys. And that's the exciting part about this kid. He's a mild-mannered kid, keeps to himself, but he's going to get back to the community. The locker room will love him. He's just a good, hardworking kid that will be excited to be a part of that city of Philadelphia. I'll share a quick story with you. When we actually played at Temple a couple years ago, Kenny and I were walking the y'all's wonderful field there in Philadelphia, and he said to me, he said, Coach, this has always been my dream to play for the Eagles. And sure enough, on draft day when he got picked, I said, man, how about that? So, he's a kid that's his dream, to play for the Eagles, and he landed it. And so he'll certainly be embraced by the fans in the city as well.
And a big part of that fandom, for sure, his older cousin, Fletcher Cox, obviously has been a great player in this town for a long, long time. When you recruited Kenny from Yazoo City in Mississippi, what did you see from him as a high school athlete, and what did he bring to his team, especially early on, making the transition to Memphis?
Yeah, he's actually a quarterback in high school. Yep. A small city kid, small town guy, very country. But he was a dynamic playmaker, and I use that word because he's explosive in every facet of his game, and you were able to see that in high school with what he did. A lot of these high school teams put their best player, the best athlete at quarterback. I wouldn't sit there and say he needs to be drop back passing for you guys in Philadelphia, but he's certainly capable of doing a lot of things all over the field, and you were able to see that unique skill set with him at quarterback. And then when he got here, he was actually we redshirted him his freshman year just because we were so fortunate. As you guys know, we've got now 5 running backs in the NFL from Memphis, and he's the 5th one. And so we've had a lot of good players before him. So we were able to redshirt him. And then, really this past in 2019, he's conference freshman of the year. Just super with everything he's able to do with it. Like I used the word earlier, a unique skill set.
And you talk about him as a runner and just how he was able to fit with all the multiple run schemes here in Philadelphia with Jeff Stoutland. Very, very similar. Zone schemes, gap schemes, inside, outside. When you have a guy that offers that level of versatility in the backfield, what does that do for you as a coach and as a game planner?
Yeah, that's what's so great is you can line him up all over, and it puts defenses in stress, right? Now all of a sudden you're saying, hey, they're in a 21 personnel set with 2 running backs in the backfield. And now all of a sudden, Kenny Gainwell's lined up at wide receiver. Well, now you may want to change your defensive call. And so that's the unique thing about him is as a game planner, a play caller, it makes your life easier because now all of a sudden it puts the stress on the defense. Where's this young man going to line up? Is he going to be a receiver? Is he going to be in the backfield? Oh, he can do runs from underneath center. You can't just sit here and say it. Then all of a sudden it's 3rd down. Well, we got to be careful. Is he going to catch a screen pass? So there's all those things. You certainly don't want to match a linebacker or safety up with him one-on-one because he'll burn you.
And that was the thing too, Coach. You guys would flex him out, and he'd be not just into the slot, but as an X receiver to the boundary. And it wasn't just alert screen. It's going to be a jailbreak screen. He'd be catching back shoulder fades and making these running routes like a receiver. At what point did you guys realize what a special talent he was as a pass catcher?
Yeah, I think you get to see a lot of that in practice with, being able to move them around. And that's something we've been able to do offensively with some of our other guys. A guy that played the same time as him, a guy named Antonio Gibson, right, who was one of those wide receivers, who's now the starting running back at Washington. Guys like Tony Pollard in Dallas, you guys know well in the conference. So, we always try to push our running backs to see what kind of receiving skills they have. But you're exactly right. Fran, before the draft, a lot of the teams called me, coaches and scouts alike said the hands of him and those routes, you're exactly right, the back shoulder fades, and you watch him versus SMU and Tulane, some of those catches that he was able to make on the sideline, you say, wait, that's a running back, that's the same kid that just ran, a pen and pull or a G scheme, for 20 yards, right? The same thing that we run. And that's what's unique about him is you never know what you're going to get. So it's very hard to put him in a box and say, this is what he is. He's so dynamic. He can be all over.
And again, for that entire interview, go check out the latest Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now, Coach Silverfield talked about Gainwell's Eagles fandom, and that's something he himself discussed after he was picked by the team on draft night. For our last clip from Kenny Gainwell, let's go to him discussing his love for the Birds and where it comes from.
Yazoo City's kind of famous up here because of Fletcher Cox, who was your cousin. Has he contacted you yet? Said welcome to the Eagles?
Nah, he haven't contacted me yet, but I know the call is on the way. But yeah, we're excited about it.
Hey Kenny, welcome to Philadelphia. First of all, what's it like in Yazoo City with Fletcher Cox? Like how big of a hero is he down there? And also, you played the one season at Memphis. really only like one full season. How much do you think that helped you kind of get ready for this, this moment?
The city is very excited about me and Fletcher and all, but they just excited about us. They're excited that we, play ball, and now we playing for each other, playing with each other on the same team. So they're gonna be even more excitement.
Hey, Kenny, congratulations. With Fletcher, he's a good bit older than you. Did you know him very well when you were growing up? I know you said on a podcast that he was big into hunting and fishing as you are as well, but were you guys close growing up? Were you around him very much?
Nah, so he stayed in Yazoo City. I stayed in Benton. But it's all in Yazoo. But he was kind of older than me, so he was already in college once I went to high school and got a chance to play. So I kind of talked to him on the phone a lot, just watched him. But he was already in college when it was time for me to grow up and do all that.
Is he the reason you were an Eagles fan growing up?
I liked Mike Vick when I was growing up. I liked Don McNabb and all those guys. Just growing up, I would just like the Eagles.
I see. Even before Fletcher got there.
Yeah, even before Fletcher got there.
Being an Eagles fan, is there any Eagles running back of the past that you watched that you kind of say, I could be like him, or that you pattern your game after?
I kind of, growing up, I used to love Derrick Stroles. That's my favorite running back. He kind of put the inspiration on me, short guys, fast guys, that's what they use. So, they kind of motivate me.
Introducing Season 2 of the Return Game podcast, Birds, Boys, and Bad Blood, presented by NovaCare Rehabilitation. When it comes to the Eagles-Cowboys rivalry, you think you know the whole story, but there is more, so much more, and we're about to uncover it all. And I think back to some of my favorite memories in the rivalry, and I remember exactly where I was, who I was with, what I was doing for so many of these games. Lito Shepherd's interception to ruin T.O.'s return to Philly. I remember leaping off the couch in my house where I grew up and nearly punching the ceiling. I jumped so high. The pickle juice game. I was actually on a family vacation in Disney World. We made sure we were back at our hotel so that we did not miss that game. 44-6. I remember I was watching that game from a bar near the mall where I was finishing up Christmas shopping earlier that day. I was with one of my best friends. Obviously, we couldn't miss the game, so we made sure we were geared up. We had a good spot in front of a big screen. We went through like 18 plates of appetizers that day. And I have these memories because these games meant so much and continue to mean so much to us as Eagles fans. So if you want to relish some of those great moments in the rivalry, be sure to go subscribe to Return Game, an Eagles Entertainment original podcast. Subscribe now wherever you listen to podcasts. So that'll do it in our coverage of Kenny Gainwell and his journey from Yazoo City up to Philadelphia. And Kenny would also be the last offensive player that the Eagles would draft in 2021, as the rest of the class was spent on the defensive side of the ball, namely in the front seven. Now, the first of those selections in the 6th round, USC defensive tackle Marlin Tui Peloto. Tui Peloto was a relative unknown nationally coming in. When he declared for the draft back in January as a redshirt junior, no one in the media was really talking about him, which is a bit strange, right? Because he was actually a 3-year starter for the Trojans, a 3-year starter at USC at nose tackle. Tui Peloto took a medical redshirt in 2017 after playing in 3 games. Then he started 10 of 12 games in 2018. He started all 12 games in 2019, and then all 6 in a COVID-shortened season this past fall. He finished his career with 8.5 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and he put a cap on his career by being named first team All Pac-12 in his final season. Now, for more in his career at USC, I caught up with his former head coach Clay Helton recently over on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. So I want to talk about new Eagles defensive tackle, Marlin Tui Pelotu, a player that you know very, very well. We're going to get into what he brings on the field and off the field. I want to first ask you just about the recruiting process with Marlin. I know that he was relatively new to football, didn't start playing organized until his freshman year. What was it like recruiting him out of the state of Oregon?
Yeah, you knew you had this young, raw talent, and his athleticism showed for a man that was a 300-pound plus individual. we kind of knew it was going to be a development project, but we knew that with that investment, some really special things could happen. And that was evident early. When he stepped on campus, his athleticism to be able to hold right at the point of attack, his just natural strength shine through, and we knew he was going to be a great player for us. But as good a player as he was just as good a person and a leader for our football team. So we knew we had the whole package. We're willing to invest in him and his development, and it was neat to see what he's become, which is one of the leaders of our football team, and now a great NFL dynamic player headed to the Eagles.
Coach, there's been some written about Marlin's background as a wrestler in high school. For you guys as a staff, when you go into the recruiting process, do you place special emphasis on players that have that multi-sport background? And what is it that wrestling background brings to the table for Marlin playing in the trenches?
Yeah, well, I learned it from my dad. My dad is an NFL offensive line coach for a long time, and he was a wrestler. And he always talked about, if you ever get an offensive lineman or defensive lineman that has wrestling talent, you got a guy that knows leverage, knows how to play low, knows how to use his body and control his body. And it's evident to see that with Marlin. Just himself as a first and second down player and being able to be a tremendous run stopper for us was unbelievable. Where I thought he grew a bunch over this last year was his pass rushing ability on third down. So, you see that wrestling background come into play, and yes, it is something that we look at in our evaluation of what other sports kids play, and obviously Marlin getting into that wrestling phase has helped him in his career.
Yeah, he had said in a recent interview that he did after he was drafted, if he didn't wrestle, he probably would have played basketball, and I think that speaks kind of to that athletic upside, to that background. What have you seen from him on the field in terms of his overall development? You mentioned seeing him jump as a pass rusher this past year as a junior. What were some of the areas that he is really strong in his game right now?
Yeah, when he came into us, he was always a great first and second down player. He's just so physically strong at the point of attack that he just freed lanes up for linebackers. You had to double team. If you tried to put a center or a guard on him, it was not going to be to your benefit, especially on first and second down and run stopping downs. But where he developed, and I was so happy of him being back this last year and for these 6 games that we had, he had put a lot of work into his pass rushing ability on third down and really created havoc on third downs now, which we thought was going to be needed for him to take that next step and really shine and help out in the NFL. And that's where you watch the Utah game, it really stands out to me because he just lived in the backfield that game, created a sack fumble which led to a touchdown in that game and really separated us in that game. But that's where he's grown the most, and that's what he's worked on the most. I thought being with Vic Soto, our defensive line coach, over this and that friendship and relationship that they have and that belief they have in each other, I really saw a great progression this fall for Marlin, and something that was needed to be a high draft pick like he was. So it's great to see that relationship take place, that growth take place, and obviously it's paying off for Marlin and the Eagles.
And for that entire interview, be sure to go check it out on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now, after he declared for the draft, Marlin accepted an invitation to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, and I watched him shortly before he made the trip down there. In one of our Senior Bowl preview episodes, we actually did a little bit of a draft. Myself, Dane Brugler, and Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports, where we drafted teams, full squads, full 22-man rosters, solely on Senior Bowl players. And Marlin was a guy that I selected relatively early. It was like the 5th, 6th, 7th round, and I talked about him and his skill set right there in that episode leading into the trip to Mobile. He got down to the Senior Bowl, had a solid week of practice, showed up in the game as well, but he also took advantage of his meetings with teams at night as well, something that I discussed with Andy Weidel after the draft. So let's look at Marlin Tui Pelotu, a player that goes a junior that got his degree, goes to the Senior Bowl. What was the first time that you would watch him? Was it before Mobile? Was it down there at the Senior Bowl? And what were your first impressions?
Yeah, he really had a strong week at the Senior Bowl, and we interviewed him. We really like the person, but he's a strong run player. He's a kid with heavy hands. He can strike and get off a block and make a play, and we think he's improved as a pass rusher as well. His pressure percentage went up each year, and we like him. We thought we got really good value for where we were able to acquire Marlin in the draft. And we're excited to get him in here and get him into this rotation and see what he can do. But a really strong kid, really good person. Another guy that we have in our class that's graduated, which we feel is really a good indicator of, where they're at in their life, also from a maturity standpoint. And we can't wait to see what he's going to do in Coach Gannon's defense.
We talked earlier with Clay Helton, and he talked about that wrestling background. How much does that help, whether it's offensive line or defensive line, but kind of having that in your back pocket as a lineman?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was with Baltimore, Kelly Gregg and Ray Lewis were great wrestlers in high school and college. And I remember those guys always talking about their feet and their hips. It's all feet and hips and balance. And they were never on the ground. If you ever watch this too, and it does transfer the field with some guys. You can see it. The ability to stay on your feet, to get out of an awkward position because you have the balance, you have the hips, how to shift your weight. And I think there's something to be said for that. And I think you watch Marlin on tape, you saw that a lot. The balance that he played with, the feet, and how he stayed off the ground.
I absolutely love the stuff about his wrestling background. And that's a couple of players here just on the show that we've talked about the multi-sport background facet of the evaluation. I'm such a big believer in that and the importance of that for young athletes as they come up, whether it's middle school, just youth sports, obviously high school as well. Just a fun aspect that I like to try and follow. Now, a few weeks after the Senior Bowl, we did a full preview of the defensive line class here on the Journey of the Draft podcast. And twice during that episode, we actually broke down Marlin Tui Pelotu. Here's what we had to say about him as we prepped you all at home for this group of defensive tackles here in 2021. Best motor, because there are a bunch of guys that really get after it.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the other side of the country here. USC D tackle Marlin
it's a great one.
Tui Pelotu, who was down at the Senior Bowl. This guy makes tons of plays out to the numbers, loves the hustle, sideline to sideline. And doing that from the nose tackle one tech position most of the time. So he had really good tape in 2019 when he was paired with Jay Tufele. Tufele obviously opted out in 2020 and left Tui Pelotu by himself. But this guy has a great motor and I think a much better upside and projection than people think.
All right, let's go to our next one here. Guy that you were higher on than most. Dane, what do you got?
Let's stick at USD. I'm going with Tui Pelotu as the guy that I feel like I'm higher on than most. I mean, this is a guy that flashes power in his hands. He can shock. He can knock back. He can separate and find the ball carrier in the run game. Doesn't have a ton of backfield production, and I think he needs to get better as a pass rusher. But he's strong. He's stout. He's a dominant run defender. This is an NFL starter, 1 gap, 2 gap scheme. I'm a big fan of what he can do. He's in my opinion, a top 60 guy in this draft, no question.
Well, Dane certainly was high on Marlin Tui Pelotu. He actually finished 3rd in his defensive tackle rankings before the draft, which you can go check out for yourself in his draft preview. It's The Beast over on The Athletic. It's still available, and it's an awesome, awesome resource. Now, Marlin's selection was a big reason why Dane picked the Eagles as having the best draft class in the entire NFL after the draft weekend was over. Marlin, a really, really intriguing player. Now, later in the 6th round, the Eagles would once again hit on the defensive line, selecting pass rusher Tehran Jackson from Coastal Carolina. This was a guy who had an extremely productive career as a pass rusher for the Chanticleers, and we talked about him a couple of times here on the show last fall. The first time was when Coastal was gearing up to take on the red-hot BYU Cougars and the rising quarterback Zach Wilson. Ben previewed that game right here on the show that week, and here's what he had to say.
While games are being canceled all over the place, we have a couple games being created as well.
That's right.
One this morning, BYU, Coastal Carolina, coming with a 13th hour handshake to have a game this weekend. That means BYU, darling QB, Zach Wilson, going to head down to Coastal Carolina on that teal field and see Tehran Jackson, one of the best pass rushers in the country, actually 3rd in the country right now in pressures. So a guy that's been productive, veteran player, senior presence. I think he's heading to the Senior Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. But a guy that Zach Wilson's definitely going to have to keep his eye on and make sure he's not being hunted in the pocket.
So Coastal Carolina would go on to win that game, taking a tiny bit of air out of the Zach Wilson balloon and vaulting themselves to an undefeated regular season. Coastal Carolina went 11-0, largely thanks to the performance of a dominant defense. And Jackson, he was the igniter. He was the engine of that unit. Now, the next week, it would be announced that he was heading to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and we broke him down once again right here on the show. let's stay along the defensive line. Ben, you mentioned Tehran Jackson, the defensive lineman for Coastal Carolina, when we talked about that CC and BYU matchup a couple weeks ago. Tell us what Tehran Jackson will bring to the Senior Bowl, because you were kind of saying, you know what, I think he's going to end up in Mobile, and then literally that afternoon it gets announced that he got the invite. What do you think about Jackson overall?
Well, he's leading college football in pressures right now, and that's not the conference. That's the entire college football at 54 QB pressure. He's got long arms. And just for a quick snapshot, every time I go to talk about him, I can't remember if I have him in the D-line category or the edge category. He's a bit of a hybrid body at 285, can play inside, outside. So that's really the snapshot of him. You know, a quarterback hunter that's with good size and can kind of play maybe inside, outside with some versatility. So I think a really interesting player that, you know, could be a guy that goes to Mobile and you realize he's not a dominant one-on-one pass rusher, or maybe he could give some tackles some trouble being a 285-pound end.
I feel like there's a handful of guys already going to Mobile that have that same kind of body type. You don't know, and we'll see in person, are they DNs or are they D tackles?
I don't think he's a twitchy type. He's not looking to run around you, which he might have a couple of highlights and embarrass a couple of people down there.
So that was a little bit of a taste of what Tehran Jackson brings to the table. But who better to represent the All-American defensive end than his coach, right? That's why Coach Jamie Chadwell was someone that I targeted at that time in late December, early January, to come onto the show during the week of the Senior Bowl to further introduce Tehran to fans of the NFL and the NFL draft. And he was gracious enough with his time to come on and discuss what his star pass rusher would bring to the NFL. And again, this interview happened in early January. Well, excited to welcome in the 2020 Coach of the Year in college football, Coach Jamie Chadwell here from Coastal Carolina. Coach, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is an honor. I appreciate you having me on.
So let's talk through Tehran Jackson heading down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Obviously a huge part of your team during your tenure down there at Coastal Carolina. There's two phases of this, right? There's the on-field and the off-field. And I want to start between the lines here. What does he bring to the table? Well, what's a quick scouting report on Tehran and what he can bring to his future NFL team?
Well, he's going to play with relentless energy. I think that's the best talent he has. He's relentless in everything he does. He practices hard. He lifts hard. He's intelligent. He's got a motor that just keeps going. And what he might not have in maybe length or overall talent, he makes up because his motor is just constantly on.
That's the thing about watching him on film, Coach. The violence and the urgency were two words I kept writing down over and over, like blue ink, red ink. Like the guy is just going 100 miles an hour. Is that something that you feel is just contagious to the rest of the guys, not just along that line, but on the rest of the defense as well?
100%. You know, the way he practices and the way he lifts, the way he studies, you can't help but raise your game up because, you know, your best player, who's, you know, All-American and a two-time All-Conference, maybe three-time, I can't remember now. He practiced every day like he was trying to earn a spot, you know. And when you have your best player doing that, you know you got a really strong culture. And he was contagious, and just the way he led and the energy that he played with. And then I think that's a big reason why we had success this year.
Coach, he ended up in his career with just under 25 sacks over the course of his career, a 3-year starter, I believe. When it comes to his ability to get after the quarterback, obviously that's what everybody's looking for all around, not just the NFL, but all around football. What is it about his ability to be able to get home and finish that stood out to you in the time that you had him?
Well, I think one, you know, just the way the get off that he has of attacking the tackle and getting the quarterback is exceptional. Then you add in the motor, the never quitting part of it, and then I think he does a good job of having a counter move. You know, I think he has a plan, and sometimes that plan doesn't work. He's been coached well enough. He knows what to go to, and I think sometimes you see a guy that got one move, and if it gets stopped, they got nothing else. But you know, he's capable of doing a couple different things, and I think that gives him the best opportunity. That's why he's had so many sacks, you know, at the collegiate level.
Coach, the thing that stands out when you go and read his bio, just how much he was leaned on as a leader throughout the course of his career. 2-time team captain the last 2 years. He was on the Leadership Council 2018, 4-time game captain as a freshman in 2017. How was he able to kind of establish himself in that locker room over the course of your career? You got there, I believe, after he was recruited. So what did you see from him early on to make you give you that faith that he would be that kind of player for you?
Well, you know, early on, he didn't say a lot. It was really more so just the work ethic. He came in at, you know, 210 pounds or 15 pounds, you know, a 2-star recruit. And yet he worked every day to earn his keep. And I think what happened over that time frame is all these other maybe highly recruited guys, they'd go by the wayside, and he just kept working. And when you have that mentality and that mindset, and everybody's seeing you put all that work in, you can't help but want to raise your game. And I think what happened with him is, even though he wasn't saying a lot from a vocal standpoint because he was still young, everybody understood how much work he put into trying to be great, and he led by example. And then what's been awesome to see these last couple of years, especially this year, the vocal part started taking over. He started being more demanding of his teammates and holding them accountable. And that, to me, has been his biggest growth. Obviously, he's played well on the field, but his being vocal and being that leader to bring people along with him is really taking hold the last couple of years.
One of the things that I'm most interested to ask you about, obviously, for fans that have gotten a chance to watch you guys play, the great season you guys had, you had a redshirt freshman quarterback playing for a majority of the season. So I'd like to ask you, just for when a freshman comes in, he wins the quarterback job. When you look at the defensive side, the veterans like Tehran, what did you see from Tehran in terms of helping to bring him along? Was there that kind of communication? What was the dynamic like when you had that senior-laden defensive front, with a quarterback that's obviously a little bit green and wet behind the ears there?
Well, they made it hard on him in practice for sure, and what that did is that actually gave the quarterback confidence. He knew how good our defensive line was. And there's times he struggled to make some plays, but then there were some times he made some. And two things happened. One, it built confidence in that freshman that, hey, if I can do it against these guys, I can do it in our league. But also those D linemen, those older guys said, hey, this kid doesn't back down. He comes after it. And I think he won them over. And that gave them confidence knowing this kid's not going to back away from anything. And so I think it was twofold. They helped him by putting pressure on him, but also once he was able to go out and make some plays, the defense gained confidence in him and said, hey, if we'll do our job, the offense is going to get some points.
And Coach, last question I have for you just about Tehran. If there's an instance or an example of just, his love and passion for the game. I know I had read that, he had taken up yoga over the course of this past offseason and trying to slim down and build up his flexibility. Were there examples that you and your staff had witnessed, say like, all right, like this guy has really completely bought in to, trying to get better as a person, as a player?
Well, it's very hard to get better as a person than him. I mean, he's tremendous, obviously, a graduate, but the way he treats people, he works in the community. He gives a lot back. Obviously, the story of losing his brother at age 9, plays for him, lost in leukemia. That's been his motivation for a long time. And but you mentioned Yogi. If you tell Tehran, hey, listen, I don't like how you are in this stance, please do everything humanly possible. But there'll be times you have to say, listen, we need you to slow down. This young tackle right here, you're killing him. Can you slow down? Can you slow down and give him something? He's constantly trying to find a way to get better. And whoever gets him, whatever happens, they're going to find an unbelievable teammate that will work nonstop and do whatever you ask for him to try to achieve a goal. And to me, if you put in what would you want a college football representing, if it was in the dictionary, it'd be him, because he worked every day like he was a walk-on. He had all these accolades, but you never knew at one time. He never walked in that locker room demanding respect. He just went out and earned it. And then he earned it off the field by the way he treated everybody. You didn't know whether you were a freshman or, a fourth-year, fifth-year senior by the way he treated you. Made everybody feel a part of that team. And to me, that's what a true leader does.
Coach Chadwell spoke so highly of Tehran, both on and off the field, and it's on camera and off camera when we talked off air afterwards. And honestly, when you poke around that Coastal program, and I had a chance to catch up with some staff members down there, you can't find a soul who doesn't absolutely love this guy as a person. He was a captain for each of the last 2 seasons for the Chanticleers, always did everything the right way on and off the field, and he did all of that while becoming Coastal's all-time leader in both sacks and tackles for loss by the end of his senior season. Tehran went down to the Senior Bowl, had a solid week in Mobile, and we talked about him once or twice during the week down there, but like a handful of his future teammates, he made an impression on the Eagles during his interview with the team, as Andy Weidel explained after the selection.
With the 191st pick, Philadelphia Eagles drafted Tehran Jackson, defensive end, Coastal Carolina.
Tehran Jackson, another Senior Bowl player. When was the first time that you got a chance to see him? And what was it that first stood out to you? What were the first impressions?
Yeah, we talked to him down there. Another guy, team captain. He's a guy that made a lot of negative plays at Coastal Carolina. I think you look at his TFLs and sack production, it's excellent. He's a team captain. And we got a chance to sit down and talk to him personally down at the Senior Bowl interview, and really, really liked the person that he was, his presence, the leadership in him, and his story, where he comes from, the humble beginnings, and he talks about his work ethic, and really like the guy, and really like the production. And I thought he had a good week of practice down there in Mobile. And then you come back, you throw the tape on, and you're like, okay, yeah, you can see it. You see the motor the guy plays with, the heavy hands, the ability to rush, and to make negative plays and be a disruptive player off the edge. So good person, good player, another guy that really fits what we're trying to do here, and excited to have him.
The Senior Bowl was a little bit light from a defensive tackle standpoint, like from a numbers standpoint down there this year. And so you saw a bunch of defensive ends that play in college that had to slide inside and play D-tackle. He was one of those guys. What was it like kind of seeing him, a little bit out of his comfort zone, having to play inside? Obviously, he was not the only one, but I thought that was an interesting kind of thing coming out of Mobile for sure.
Yeah, again, it's the attitude. He's a selfless player. He's a team guy, and he just wanted the chance to go and show what he could do down there. Competitiveness showed up, and he's a guy that'll do whatever for the team, and we love that mentality. We love that attitude. And, 6 of these 9 picks that we got, our draft picks, were from the Senior Bowl this year. It was a valuable tool, and I thought that Jim Nagy and his crew did a phenomenal job down there putting this on, and the access we had to the players this year. We were able to interview 128 players down there this year, every player that was down there. And that was valuable to us in this process. And, 6 of the 9 guys we got from the Senior Bowl, and 6 of our 9 draft picks were team captains, several of which were 2-time team captains. So we're just excited to get these guys here on the field, get them going in this rookie mini camp, and then get the vets to come in and see how they assimilate here on our team.
Tehran's maturity and attitude stood out to the Eagles during that interview process. And as I mentioned, everyone just glows about the way he handles himself. When you talk to people around him, many will point to the fact that he had to overcome extreme adversity at a young age. And when he was just 9 years old, Tehran's older brother passed away from leukemia at the age of 12. Tehran reflected on that tragedy and how it impacted him with Dave Spadaro after the draft.
You mentioned your brother, and I want to get into that story. Your brother, Darren, passed away of leukemia when you guys were little. You were 9 years old at the time. I mean, you've overcome a lot. So to get to this point, do you feel like Darren's right next to you, kind of guiding you the whole way through?
Yeah, for sure, man. I always felt like he was right beside me, man. I make sure I make the right decisions, man. So, right after I got drafted, man, I went and hugged my mom, man, and I kind of looked to the sky like, I made that promise, and I stuck to it. So, like I said, it's been overwhelming, the satisfaction that I've had after I got drafted.
What did his death and going through that experience, what did that teach you as a young boy about life, and how did it change you, do you think? Not football related necessarily, but just in life.
Yeah. It definitely changed me a lot, man. Going through that, I feel like how my brother reacted to the stuff is what changed me. Like going throughout the whole process of getting chemo and stuff, man, he always had a smile on his face. He was always trying to help other people. So, just that, man, I tried to embody that in my life, man. Never complaining when I'm working out, just trying to give my best efforts, man. And just trying to live my life like he did.
For that entire interview, be sure to go check out the Eagles Insider podcast wherever podcasts can be found. And that's what we have here today on Tehran Jackson, an easy player to root for here in this Eagles draft class. Now, let's transition to the linebacker position, where with their final pick of the 6th round, the Eagles selected Jacoby Stevens out of LSU. Jacoby was a 5-star recruit out of the state of Tennessee. He originally went to LSU as a wide receiver, started games on offense as a true freshman, which I don't know if you know, that's hard to do at the wide receiver position at LSU, but he gets a start at wide receiver. Then he switches to safety halfway through that freshman season. Now, the following year, as a sophomore, he started 4 games. He was an active role player on defense. Then he blew up in 2019. That was the Tigers' undefeated championship season with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Stevens started every single game that year. He was second team All-SEC, finished the year with 92 tackles, 9 TFLs, 5 sacks, sacks, 3 picks. He was all around the football. He stuffed the stat sheet, and he was everywhere. So when it came to preview the top players in the SEC last fall, we had to discuss Jacoby Stevens.
A player I really want to talk about, like you said, safety linebacker Jacoby Stevens out of LSU. And this is one of my favorite players in the draft. He's a really interesting player, 6'1", 228. This guy played all over the field for LSU. He'd be a free safety, a box linebacker. He'd be detached out in the slot. He'll play off the edge. He'll even play outside the numbers to match up against some tight ends. This guy absolutely loaded up the stat sheet with sacks, TFLs, 3 picks, PBUs. In every phase of the game, I put up clips this morning, a back-end interception coming down and playing the quarterback on pursuit to the perimeter. He made a nice interception as a linebacker in that curl hook window, defended tight ends like Kyle Pitts man-to-man. Really, really interesting player. He had 3 sacks in the Arkansas game. He was lining up opposite of Cleveon Chasen at defensive end. This guy played everywhere. 979 snaps on defense, another 114 on special teams. It's nearly 1,100 snaps he played last year, all over the field. And pick whoever you want as far as athletic safety linebacker. Thomas Davis coming out of Georgia, Lawrence Timmons out of Florida State, maybe a Gerard Page, if you remember his athletic upside as a giant safety that could come down and play linebacker. Really, really fun player. And while, Grant Delpit and Christian Fulton and Patrick Queen and Chasen are all off to the NFL and stole a lot of headlines, go back and watch the tape, because that number 3 was all over the field for the LSU Tigers. And I just didn't hear his name called a whole lot. Obviously, surrounded by a lot of stars and a lot of conversation to get to. But this guy was a really fun player.
So the season gets underway, and in the opening weekend, LSU took on Mississippi State and their explosive new offense under head coach Mike Leach. Ben dove deeper into the matchup with State's offense versus LSU's new-look defense, and I was able to squeeze Stevens in to that conversation.
Cox was a guy that was motioned out a lot at North Dakota State, had to cover in the pass game quite a bit, more of an athletic linebacker. I want to see if Mike Leach maybe tries to isolate him on Kylan Hill on some third downs, and if Kylan Hill has any value in the pass game to maybe show NFL scouts.
To kind of add on to that, how about Jacoby Stevens and seeing him in space against Kylan Hill potentially as well? Obviously it's a new defensive scheme down there in LSU. With Bo Pelini stepping in as the defensive coordinator for Dave Aranda. Stevens is a guy, you highlighted him in our SEC preview. I watched him afterwards, and dude, I like him as a linebacker convert, man. Like I wrote down Mark Barron when watching him. And
that's a great comp, by the way. Great comp.
Dude, I really, really like Stevens. He is a powerful striker. I mean, he essentially spent most of his time down in the box. You could see him play center field, and he could do some things. And I like that versatility. But I'll tell you what, man. Like I liked the idea of him making that transition to the linebacker spot, and that's not a knock. I think really, really highly of Jacoby Stevens.
So LSU would actually end up losing that game to Mississippi State, and that was a little bit of an omen of things to come for the Bayou Bengals, as their 2020 season just did not unfold the way they had hoped for after their title run the year before. There was injuries, opt-outs, turnover on the roster and the coaching staff that they just could not overcome. LSU could not get rolling last fall. They limped to a 5-5 record. Still, Stevens got attention. He was mocked by the Eagles, by you, the fans, multiple times last fall in our draft mailbag segment. And just in December, he earned an invite to the Senior Bowl, which we talked about here on the show shortly afterwards. And the big takeaway from that announcement was that Stevens would in fact be doing linebacker drills down in Mobile. Jim Nagy, the executive director of the game, actually responded to me on Twitter about the subject, confirming as much. So some in the NFL appeared to see Stevens the same way that I did, as a guy that could potentially make that transition to the linebacker spot. The trip to Mobile comes and goes. Stevens was solid throughout the week of practice and in the game as he participated at both positions. And as the offseason kept going, we had one of my favorite conversations of the year on the show. We do it almost every year, every spring, about players to watch for late in the draft. And in having that conversation, we brought up Jacoby Stevens. Are there some players that you look at as, maybe late day 2 or day 3 type prospects that kind of remind you and check some of the same boxes that some players that are getting that, first round or top 50 type buzz? I feel like last year, one good example of that was Isaiah Simmons coming out of Clemson and Jeremy Chin out of Southern Illinois. Now, Jeremy Chin ends up going, early round 3, not day 3. But I think that's kind of an interesting discussion to have, is who are the guys that kind of check some of those same boxes that you could get a little bit later in the draft.
I'm going to go on to the defensive side of the ball. We all know about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, his versatile skill set at 6'1", 215, 220. If you don't get him in round 1, come back on day 3, and I think that's where Jacoby Stevens is going to fall. Not nearly as athletic, not nearly as explosive. I got news for you guys. Nobody really is compared to, JOK. But Jacoby Stevens, as far as usage, versatility, general athleticism, very similar type of players that can play all over the defense. So I think he's a really interesting kind of chess piece that's going to be used in a similar mold. Now, I think Owusu-Koramoah, obviously freak show speed and athleticism. That's why he's going, top 30. But Jacoby Stevens, really good player, in my opinion.
Yeah, then Stevens plays better through contact, playing in traffic a little bit better, in my opinion, too.
And a little more size, probably pushing 230, while, JOK is probably right around 215.
So those hybrid players, those positionless players at the second and third level, they get drafted every year on all 3 days of the draft. And I really felt like a team could get a bargain with Jacoby Stevens when it was all said and done. Based off the pre-draft projections, I thought he'd be better than a late round pick, and that's what everybody kind of felt. He would be a 5th, 6th, 7th round selection. So day 3 of the draft arrives, and as Eagles Hall of Famer Harold Carmichael would announce, the Eagles would select Stevens at the end of the 6th round. But interestingly enough, when the team announced the pick, he was listed at linebacker and not at safety. So that's something Jacoby was asked about at his post-draft press conference.
With the 224th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles selected Jacoby Stevens, linebacker from Louisiana State. Go Birds.
Hey, Jacoby, congratulations. I just see that they have a linebacker listed under your name there. Linebacker, safety, do you have a preference which you play? Have you played much linebacker?
I don't have a preference. At the end of the day, my thing is about coming in and being able to contribute any way possible. If they have me come in and they want me to play linebacker, or they want me to play safety, regardless of what position they want me to play, my job now is to contribute to the Philadelphia Eagles defense. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. And what they label me as, or where they see me playing, that's my coaches, and that's the front office's job. And for me, it's just to come in and do the tasks that they give me.
On the where you're going to play the linebacker part, how do you see that? I mean, I know you said you do whatever, but how do you think that's a good role for you if they make you kind of a hybrid linebacker? There are a lot of those kind of guys in the league now. Have you thought about that a lot?
I think that's what I really did at LSU. I really did some of that at LSU. I just had the safety title. I have before the at LSU and before the draft process, I always have a theory where football is becoming kind of like basketball in a sense, where it's becoming positionless, where it's all about matchups. It's all about getting this guy on another guy. And so now defenses are getting guys that can do just about a little bit of everything. And it's kind of getting to the point now to where all these guys are playing these different positions. You don't know what to call them. So, I don't get into the label. At the end of the day, the Eagles organization, and hopefully when I come to Philadelphia, the fans just know that I'm a football player. I love football, so I can. You can label me as a D tackle, but at the end of the day, I'm on the football field, hopefully making plays.
Jacoby, I saw you came out of high school as a wide receiver, and you played at LSU as a freshman there. What led to the transformation to defense, and how were you about doing that? Was that something you wanted to do, or did the coaches kind of bring that up?
Right. So in high school, I played just about everything. I played receiver, running back. For me, like I said, with now, I'm going to do everything that I can to be on the field and stay on the field. And it carried over to college. Coach O and Austin Thomas, they asked me to, because I came in as a safety, so they asked me to move over to receiver because of depth. So I moved up, and it was something that I did. It was a short conversation. It was, I want to say maybe a 5-10 minute conversation, because Coach O, he was, I guess he didn't, he wanted to make sure I was okay with it. But after he asked me, I was like, sure, anything to do to get on the field. And we had some depth issues later in the season at safety that year, my freshman year. And, he came and asked me again, and I did it again. So a lot of guys, I say a lot of guys are quick to say that they're a team first guy, and they put the team first, and, they're willing to do whatever it takes. I say that I've actually have proof in the pudding. I've done it. I say it, and I've actually have proof that I am a team first guy. I'm willing to put myself, second to the organization. And I think that's how every guy is, and that's how every championship program is.
So you heard Jacoby talk about his versatility and his willingness to play anywhere on defense there after he was picked. Well, I recently caught up with Andy Wild to discuss the selection, his first impression of Jacoby at LSU, and what made him think he could make that position change in Philadelphia. Look at Jacoby Stevens. This is a player that was a longtime player for LSU. When's the first time you really kind of took note of Jacoby Stevens, and what was it that first stood out to you?
Well, I think, you saw last year the way they played on defense when we were watching the prospects. You would see him flash, and you see some big hits, the blitzing ability. And then this year, you're watching, they didn't have, obviously, the season their team did that the year before, and they won the national championship. But his physicality, his toughness, the productiveness as a blitzer, it showed up. He's a guy that's played different alignments in their defense. He was at the Senior Bowl. We get to spend time with him down there. Really impressive interview. From a maturity standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a football intelligence. Hit a good week of practice down there, linebacker. And we just think he's a good football player. And he's a good football player. He fits what we want our guys to be. We like his leadership ability, and we couldn't be happier to draft him where we got him in this draft. So looking forward to what he can contribute this year and what he's going to be as an Eagle.
When you're projecting a guy to make a position change, like we see with Jacoby, what are some of the things that go into that from an evaluation standpoint? The things that maybe fans don't necessarily think about that are a big part of whether that guy succeeds or fails making that switch?
I think it's football intelligence, and I think it's a selflessness. It's an ability to play wherever you need. Wherever I can, the mindset, hey, wherever you need me to play to help the team, I'll do it. And he has that. And that's the kind of person he is. And he's got the skill set, an attractive skill set, we feel. And we're looking forward to seeing how he fits here and what he's going to do for our defense and our team this year.
The last clip I want to share from Jacoby's arrival in Philly comes from Dave Spadaro and the Eagles Insider podcast, where Dave asked him about wearing the special jersey number 7 down at LSU. It was a revered honor for players down at the Bayou and the impact he had off the field for the Tigers program.
You also, it's interesting, your jersey number, you played with the number 3 for 3 seasons, then number 7 in 2020. For those who don't understand the significance of that, please explain.
I was given the honor of wearing 7, and it really meant a little bit more to me because of Patrick Peterson when he wore it at LSU. I watched him in middle school wear it at LSU. I used to watch his highlights all the time, a little bit too much. Some of my teachers said I watched it too much during class hours, but I watched him, when I had my first flip phone, he was my screensaver. I had him, I remember the exact picture I had of him on my screensaver. So I really idolized Patrick Peterson. I idolize him to this day. So when Coach O asked me to wear his number, basically at the school that he wore, I was never going to turn that opportunity down.
I'm also impressed with the things you did off the field. Really involved in the community. A lot of the civil liberties and social justice matters, you really took a lot of importance out of that. You got all of your teammates, you helped get all your teammates registered to vote last year. Why was that so important to you?
For me, and one of the things my dad always preached to me is about the opportunity and the knowledge. It wasn't that I was trying to take a political side or I was trying to push an agenda. It was really just being able to open up opportunities and being able to share stories and give knowledge on certain situations. And like my dad said, after I do that, it's on you to follow through with what your heart tells you to do. And for the marches, it wasn't to push an agenda, in a sense. It was just to spread awareness and basically just show that we're here and that we understand what's going on, and basically just and guys on the team to voice the things they've been through. You know, my grandpa told me before he passed was just do what's right, and that's you know, I live like that every day.
Soon after the Eagles picked Stevens and announced him as a linebacker, they made a similar selection with another potential position change as they selected Tulane pass rusher Patrick Johnson in the 7th round, and they also listed him as a linebacker on draft night. Despite finishing his career as the all-time leader in sacks and being the only Tulane player in history to earn all-conference honors for 3 straight seasons, Johnson wasn't talked about that often during the pre-draft process. At 6'2", 240 pounds, he was viewed as an undersized defensive end prospect. He was not invited to the Senior Bowl like his teammate Cam Sample was, but he did accept an invitation to the Shrine Bowl, which, like I said earlier, was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Still, despite his frame, Johnson was productive, and his numbers happened for a reason. The film was really impressive, and ironically enough, in our final episode before the draft, it was a fan Q&A with both Dane Brugler and Greg Cosell. First time those guys had ever done a podcast together. It was really fun. A question came up that had those guys bringing up Patrick Johnson and his potential entering the NFL. Big Dogs 1318 on Twitter. Who is one prospect you think the NFL is higher or lower on than the media / Twitter?
Dane, what is your, I don't know if you've spoken to people about him. Well, what do people think about Patrick Johnson from Tulane?
He's interesting because he's a little undersized, because he was really productive.
I really liked his tape.
Yeah, at 6'2", 240. Yeah. So it's, is he going to be a 3-4 only guy? Is he? But I think as a sub-package rusher, I think he is a draftable player.
Without question.
Well,
honestly, I put him in that same bucket as the Shaka Tonys, the Quincy Roches, the Malcolm Kuntzes, like just a sawed-off rusher. But he knows how to win, and he plays with a high motor. He's been productive. He's an interesting player.
Yes.
So the Eagles made Johnson their final pick of the draft, and I caught up with Andy Weidel one final time to ask about Johnson and his first impression of him on film. Here's what Andy had to say. The last one, Andy. Patrick Johnson, first impressions watching him on film.
Good player, good football player. Another kid. He was another guy that's a 2-time team captain. Made a lot of negative plays at Tulane. Pass rushing, tackles for loss, played with a high motor. Really strong hands, can set an edge, can get off a block and make a play. And, the mentality he played with, maturity, and the leadership that he has stood out to us. And we're excited to get him in our defense and see what he can do at the same linebacker role.
One of a handful of defensive linemen and the front 7 players where they just play nonstop. The motor really, really stands out on film with Patrick, with Tehran, with Marlin. Was that something that was kind of a point of emphasis for these guys that played up front? I mean, it's going to fit well with guys like BG and Fletcher Cox already in the room for sure.
Sure, Milton Williams too. All these guys that play the right way. They run to the football, and you see the motor, you saw the relentlessness. And that's what we want, that identity that those guys, they bring that here. You add a crop of guys like that, young defensive linemen that are hungry, that play with a relentless motor. They're good people. They're smart. They have leadership ability. They just fit what we want to be, as the Eagles and with Coach Sirianni and Coach Gannon in their program.
Over on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, I also recently caught up with Johnson's head coach, Willie Fritz, and he had nothing but great things to say about his former star pass rusher and discuss what he could look like with his transitional linebacker in the NFL.
Well, I'm very excited for Patrick and his family. He's an awesome young man, and the people of Philadelphia are going to love him. He was with me for 4 years. I never had any issues with him. You have what you call a list that a guy misses breakfast or lunch or class or an assignment or, late to a meeting or weightlifting session. There's a lot of things that collegiate student athletes have to do. And he was never on it for 4 years. Just a great young man, great person, and one heck of a football player.
So, Coach, you get hired there in 2016. His freshman year was 2017. So I got to think he was part of that first full year recruiting class that you had, right? At what point did you realize that he was going to be a special talent for you, whether it was in the recruiting process or after he got to campus?
We didn't get on him until late. He's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Patrick told me this yesterday. He called me. He said last Eagles draft pick from Chattanooga was a pretty decent player named Reggie White. Is that right?
I believe so.
So Patrick, we got on him kind of late. Didn't really have any Division I offers. Had a lot of FCS 1AA offers. He was a very good tight end in high school, along with being a great defensive end. A little bit more of a hand in the ground defensive end and a three-point stance. We got him in, and this was kind of a rebuild type program here at Tulane. So we had a lot of true freshmen who were able to come in and play for us. Patrick actually started some as a true freshman. He played against Ohio State and Oklahoma and some teams like that, and and was really playing inside, against offensive guards and tackles. His last couple of years, we moved him to the outside edge of offensive tackles, inside half of the tight end, and he just did an excellent job as an edge rusher. He's the all-time leading sack leader in school history. He has a knack for using his hands and feet in conjunction with each other and timing up his hand strike on the offensive lineman. Then we started dropping him into space a little bit. Started playing underneath, in a two shell look, three deep type look, running with the back out of the backfield. We even matched him up on guys out on the perimeter. So he's an excellent athlete. I think his pro day measurables were just incredible. I think he ran a 4.53, at around 250 pounds. So I'm looking forward for Eagle fans to see what he can do. I also think he's going to be good in the kicking game. I didn't play him as much in the kicking game because he played almost every snap for us on defense, but he'll be able to play on the punt return, kickoff return. He could be a tight end wing on extra point field goals. So just a great all-around player.
Coach, I was really glad that you brought up what he was able to do for you guys moving in reverse, playing in coverage, because I think a lot of Eagles fans say, hey, all-time leading sack artist, this is a guy that can get after the quarterback. The Eagles announce him as a linebacker, so they think of it as a position switch, but it's something that you guys had him doing in your various zone concepts.
Yeah, I'd sometimes get upset when we dropped him too much. Get his ears back and go, but and sometimes he had to match the number 3 person in the offensive set. He's a smart football player. I just think the Eagles got a steal. Patrick's pumped about all he's been saying is "Fly Eagles fly," but I was just a little bit frustrated because I thought he would have been picked a lot earlier. But it doesn't matter where you get picked; it's how you end up. And I think he's got an opportunity to have a great career there in Philadelphia.
Coach, when you talk about pass rushers, at his size, 6'2", you mentioned around 250 pounds, a little bit on the smaller end. When you have a guy that had that level of production, I think it speaks to just a guy that just has a knack for getting after the quarterback. He's never behind the passer. He's always found a way to get from A to B. What was that development like for him, and how did you see him grow in terms of being able to win with his hands at the top of the rush and be able to string moves together and get home for a sack?
Yeah, I had a couple of really good. He worked with a couple of great defensive line coaches. Kevin Peoples, he had his first 3 years. He's now the defensive line coach at Indiana. And then Byron Dawson, Coach Patrick this last year. Both of them did a sensational job of, teaching him pro techniques. We've got access to this pro team here in town that we get to talk to a lot of their players. A lot of their players come over here and work out. I've got some guys in the NFL that play on the defensive line that come back and train here at Tulane. I know they work with Patrick quite a bit. So it just, he got a spin move in his arsenal that he picked up here the last couple of years. But it's just that strike timing with his hands on the hands of the offensive tackle that he was just so good at. And he almost probably had another 10 sacks in his career. He had the guy, within his clutches. It's hard to get a sack in collegiate football. It's hard to get a sack in the NFL. Those quarterbacks do a nice job having that internal clock and getting rid of the ball just a split second before you arrive. But he's certainly put pressure on guys. His whole career. He's also excellent against the run. Fullbacks kicking him out. guards pulling him and kicking him out. You know, we call it hard jointing a guy where you're near foot, near shoulder, near arm, or you know, making that hole as small as a phone booth, wrong shouldering guys, blowing it up, not giving a running lane for the running back. So, you know, he's not just a one-dimensional guy. He's good, you know, against when the guy pass sets on him. He's great against all run plays too.
For that entire interview, go check out the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. And Coach Fritz talked about Johnson's versatility there. And like Jacoby Stevens, when Johnson was announced as linebacker, the ears of the Eagles beat writers perked up, and he was asked about that potential position switch after the draft.
Hey, Patrick, you've been an edge rusher. They're listing you as a linebacker. Are you expecting to be an off-ball linebacker here? What kind of role are you seeing for yourself?
You know, for me, it's like wherever the coaches are really going to need and bring to the table, I can bring. I'm a very versatile player. I've done a little bit of both. You know, when I talked to coach and the GM and stuff, they said they want me to be a guy to come in there and be able to be a good edge rusher for them and, you know, sack the quarterback and some hurries and rushes and stuff.
Yeah, Patrick, you got a lot of production. I think 21 sacks. It's not easy to get to the quarterback. I mean, how do you do it so effectively, and what do you need to work on to be even better as a pass rusher?
You know, for me is, you know, just keep getting stronger. And, you know, for me, I feel like I'm a technician. I bring a lot to the table, especially as a rusher. I have a lot of different counters, a lot of different, you know, speed to power moves. I just like all around. I have a lot of moves up my sleeve, and I think Philadelphia fans are really going to love watching me play because all the stuff I can bring to the table for the team.
After the draft, Johnson caught up with Eagles insider Dave Spadaro over on the Eagles Insider podcast, and Dave asked Patrick a simple question. Is there a guy that you model your game after? And ironically, he got a very Eagles-related answer.
Patrick, are there players that you've kind of looked up to and maybe even modeled your game after through the years?
You know, a guy that I'm actually about to play with, Derek Barnett. You know, when I was in high school, he was kind of just coming out. I'm from Tennessee, so he was actually just right down the street from me, about an hour and a half. He was a guy that was able to get after the quarterback very well, using a lot of different moves. You know, he's not the biggest DN, but at the same time, he uses his power and his speed to his advantage. So, you know, watching him and a bunch of other guys.
And Derek plays so hard. I mean, everybody thinks they play hard, but when you watch Derek, you really see a guy who lets it all out on the field. Is that the kind of player you are?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's not a single snap that I don't feel like I went off 100%. I leave everything out there every single game.
And again, for that full interview, go check out the Eagles Insider podcast wherever podcasts can be found. Now, if you're an Eagles fan and you enjoyed this look back and you're not already subscribed here to the Journey to the Draft podcast, hopefully over this last hour plus, I convinced you to do so. And if not, I need to know why. We were ahead of the curve on the conversation surrounding so many of the Eagles draft choices. And if you had been subscribed all along, you would have been on that ride with us. But it's not too late. You can jump on with us right now because the journey to the 2022 NFL Draft is just beginning. The Eagles could potentially have 3 first-round draft choices next spring. It's going to be a huge NFL Draft season next year. So make sure you're subscribed and you'll know all about these top players, the sleepers, the underrated stars, the impact rookies, everyone that's going to be involved in this 2022 NFL Draft. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week. You guys will be excited about what we've got coming up over the next few weeks right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand. Download the official mobile app of the Philadelphia Eagles. Catch breaking news, see real-time stats, watch live or on-demand video clips, listen to Eagles podcasts, and so much more. Now you can stay in touch with the Eagles anytime, anywhere.